hotel clerk sleeps with the supermodel, but quickly finds himself involved in a murder investigation. Listen as we discuss pretentious perfume commercials, tape recorder confessions, and watching sex scenes with your dad. Then we find out if Hexed stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah, and joining me for our first episode of 2025 is you, James Brief.
I'm James Brief. Happy New Year, Al.
Happy New Year to you, James.
I'm really excited for a year of podcasting. I'm excited to talk about the movie Hexed today, and I'm excited to maybe mispronounce one word this year, which I've been known to do from time to time in this podcast.
Just the once. But before we get into Hexed, I saw these articles about James Gunn talking about the DCEU, and I immediately thought of you, in part just because we're both nerds and we talk about shit like this. Did you read this James Gunn talking about canon stuff?
Yeah, it was very interesting to see how James Gunn is not DC's Kevin Feige. It's refreshing, and no fault on Kevin Feige. To me, I think the Infinity Saga will go down to me as just one of the most fun 10-year movie sagas ever. But I don't think I wanted another Kevin Feige with DC, and I think that's kind of where Warner Brothers went the first time with the DCEU, and I'm glad that they got a totally different head, well, whatever you call it, the studio head that has a very different philosophy than Kevin Feige. Not necessarily one's bad and one's good. They're just different.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he's trying to not do the Marvel formula, which is fine. So basically what James Gunn was talking about is that DC Studios is going to have canon in his universe, which is now underway with Creature Commandos. I haven't watched the animated show on Max yet, but basically it's not what Marvel is doing, where they are building one universe where all of these stories are connected. What James Gunn wants to do is create one universe where all of these characters live, but everything is separate, kind of. And it doesn't all have to be one unified story. And I think that in a lot of ways makes sense for comic book movies kind of in general, because that's sort of how comic books work. There's Superman stories and there are Batman stories, and sometimes they meet up and they, fight Joker or Lex Luthor together, but they don't have to do that all of the time. And I think the reason why there are these articles talking about this, and the reason that James Gunn is getting asked a lot of these questions, really comes down to Peacemaker Season 2. And I'll do this very, very briefly if you're not into this as a thing. But Peacemaker Season 2 is part of the new DC continuity. But it's Season 2. So it's a continuation from Season 1. And Season 1 is a spin-off of The Suicide Squad. And The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 have connections to the Zack Snyder DC universe. So if all of that is true, then Peacemaker Season 2 would have to be in that continuity and not this new continuity. And James Gunn has said, oh, don't you worry, we'll address that in Episode 1, Season 2. I haven't seen it. It hasn't come out yet. I'm guessing it's going to be like a one-line throwaway of like, hey, did that happen? I don't know. Maybe it did. Whatever. And blubbity blah blah. It will go on. But I'm kind of two minds about it, because on the one hand, I realize how I just sounded when I said that. I sound like the nerd character on The Simpsons complaining about, in episode 4F27, how come blah, 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 blah. I'm also of a completely different mind about it, where I really liked Peacemaker season 1. And I'm probably going to watch Peacemaker season 2 because I expect it to be entertaining. Because I like James Gunn and I like John Cena and I like the entire supporting cast. So who gives a shit which universe it's in? That doesn't matter.
I feel like James Gunn is basically kind of saying it's going to be more like Star Trek, where it's going to be like, yeah, there's going to be an episode in 1963 where Kirk clicked on something and a phaser went, but we're not going to make the next 100 years because that panel didn't vaporize in front of him. So now we can't say that laser beams vaporize things. We're just going to kind of go with this is what it's going to be from now on. And if you really want to go and find the real answer, the answer is shut up.
Right.
Or the answer is go online, but we're not going to really answer it. But he's not going to have his hands tied because Superman did something and now you can't have a smaller Blue Beetle film because why doesn't Superman just save the day in this small time, crisis you're having in your high school?
You said it'll be more like Star Trek. Gunn said it'll be more like Star Wars. And I believe he was referring more to the TV projects than the movies, where basically what he likes and what he wants is for there to be these stories that exist in the same universe, but that can feel very different. Because, Mandalorian feels very different from Andor, which is very different from Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is very different from Skeleton Crew. And all of these shows have very distinct vibes and genres and tones and all of that. And that is pretty damn cool. It's not a bad philosophy for a guy like James Gunn who just wants there to be cool stories. He just wants to tell cool fucking stories and let other people tell cool fucking stories in their own unique ways.
Absolutely. I didn't like Marvel films that only seem to be setting up other films, and I don't necessarily need every film to be based on the film before it.
Right. But let's get into Hexed. So you had said at the end of last week's episode that you'd never seen this movie or never heard of this movie. That is not surprising. I saw this movie in the theater.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember vividly seeing this movie with my dad, and there's really one reason why it was memorable, and that's because of the sex scene, which we'll get into later, but that's really the only thing I remembered about it.
The second you said you saw it with your dad, I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, there's nothing more awkward than watching sex scenes right next to your parents. It does happen occasionally, and it's not unawkward.
Very, very true, but I'm pretty sure it was just my dad and I who saw this. My stepmom wasn't there, my sister wasn't there, so that made it a little bit better, I guess?
A little bit.
But why don't you tell our listeners what this movie is all about, James?
So this film is about Matthew Welsh. He's a front desk clerk at the Holiday Palace Hotel. Matt is a pathological liar who claims to have had a relationship with an international supermodel, Hexed. And now when Hexed comes to stay at his hotel, he decides to make his fantasy a reality. He impersonates a man named Pratt, who is supposed to meet Hexed and sleeps with her. But Hexed tries to kill Matt, thinking that Matt was the real Pratt, who is blackmailing her, as it turns out. So Matt goes with Hexed to talk to the real Pratt, and Hexed promptly murders him. Matt's coworker Simon suspects something, and Hexed kills him too. Matt then finds himself on the run from the cops, with no one willing to believe his story, except for his friend Gloria, who has a crush on him. Now, in the end, Matt ends up confronting Hexed and gets her to confess to the whole thing before she falls from a rooftop to her death.
Right. So, I feel like this movie was in theaters and then out of theaters immediately. Was it a bomb?
It depends how you look at it. It came out on my sister's birthday, Amanda's birthday, January 22nd, 1993. And the film had a $700,000 budget, understandably. And according to my sources, it made $2 million at the box office. Now,
Okay.
I'm curious, if you can remember, how the hell did you find yourself watching this film? Did you see an advertisement for it? Was the other film you want to see sold out and you went to see this? Because I'm wondering if there was a $700,000 budget, as long as there was no advertising, then they probably made some money.
I don't know. I really don't remember. It came out in January. Maybe this was a movie we saw over February break and there wasn't much playing. I really don't remember. I know that I liked going to see movies with my dad, but no, I don't remember why. Maybe it looked sexy and I wanted to see it, and my dad thought, well, Alan just had his bar mitzvah, so maybe it's okay now. Yeah, I don't know.
Honestly, looking at the box office, there's not much, honestly, for a 13-year-old boy here. There's Aladdin, A Few Good Men. You're not seeing that. Alive. You're not seeing the movie about eating humans in the Andes Mountains. Scent of a Woman. Hooah. The Bodyguard. Forever Young. And you had already seen Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. So
Yes.
unless you were going to see Lorenzo's Oil, I don't think there was really much for you to see. So, based on the poster, I did see what the poster looked like, a good-looking woman on it. And I saw one of the taglines were, and it references a lot of other films there, like More Fatal Than Attraction,
More basic than any instinct.
More Motion Than Any Picture, a comedy about sex, violence, and other family values. If you had already decided we're gonna see a movie, and it's this, A Few Good Men, or Alive, I could see you picking this, but I'm just very curious as to why you did.
I think you answered your question. I think that's why. This was the only option at the movie theater that day. And the movie starts with the New Year's Eve party. Right away, you just see Matt as this liar, and that's his whole thing. He lies to everybody. He does decent impressions. Ari Gross, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but
Yeah, I think so.
he's decent at doing all of these different voices. But, the movie really kicks into gear when you meet Hexina, played by Claudia Christian. She's beautiful. I thought that she later had a career in one of the Star Trek spinoffs. I was looking today. That's not true. She was in Babylon 5. To me, Babylon 5 equals Star Trek. It doesn't. But at least she went on to have a career after this movie. Ari Gross, I don't think he's done much of anything in terms of notable roles. He has a long IMDb page with TV shows whose names I recognize. He was in Better Call Saul and Fringe, and he had one episode here, one episode there, but this wasn't a breakout role for him.
No, I mean, the guy's regularly worked since the movie came out. He did 42 episodes of Ellen.
Oh yeah, he was in Ellen.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I think he's a talented actor because I think he's kind of funny. I laughed at a good number of things he did. I do not mean this as an insult, as someone might think this is an insult. I don't think he's a leading man. Someone like Samuel L. Jackson is typically the second or third build guy. Like, there's some guys that are going to be the leading man and some guys that are great as that second guy.
Well, you said that you laughed at some of the things he does. I do think that this movie does have some pretty good gags. I chuckled early in the movie when it's New Year's Eve and there's fireworks and the boss says, "Oh man, it gives me flashbacks to Vietnam." And then Matt says, "Oh, you were in Vietnam?" And the boss says, "No, but there are a lot of movies." That kind of made me chuckle. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, there's a couple good ones. Another one I liked is there was a passing one on a commercial it was a 1-900 number, which is a little outdated now. Usually they used to say you must be at least 18 to call. Do you remember what it said?
You must sound like you're 18.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a moment when Matt is preparing for his date with Hexina, and he does the breath spray, and he sprays it not in his mouth, but he sprays it in Gloria's face and doesn't even realize what he's doing. The one that really, really made me laugh is when the cops are in the hotel. They know something's going on in this hotel, and they have one of those letter boards that you see like in lobbies sometimes, and it said, Today's schedule, police interrogation and champagne brunch. That's funny. That actually made me laugh out loud. But that joke is paired with the valet openly weeping when he's being interviewed. That's just not funny. I think the problem with some of these jokes is that sometimes the funny ones are right next to really unfunny ones. They're not consistent, basically.
You know, my problem with this film is that it doesn't quite know whether it's a Naked Gun or one of these spoofy National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon, or is it a crime comedy like Rush Hour or something like that, a little action-y comedy. The film doesn't really establish if this is a complete farce film or if it's somewhat serious, because the entire premise of this murderous woman, it's blackmail. It's a great motive for murder in a film, but the motive for murder is that this beautiful model used to be fat. I think it's incredibly stupid. It's not funny either. That's the biggest crime. It's not funny and it's just stupid. I was like, wait, what?
You're right. The movie does ping pong back and forth between a more traditional black comedy, which makes jokes about murder and death and violence and things like that, and these kind of more slapsticky elements. And the moment where I think that really, really doesn't work is when there's the guy, Victor Thummel, and he's constantly getting in Matt's way. He's an asshole. You hate him. But basically, he is the suspect, and the cops beat the living shit out of him. There's one funny line in there where he says, "Hey, you can't do this to me. I'm a Republican." That made me laugh. That joke definitely stands the test of time. But then someone in this hotel lobby takes out a video camera, a camcorder, and starts filming it, which is clearly a reference to the Rodney King beating. And you know what? Now this isn't funny. I was even kind of thinking about this scene from the perspective of racist cops, because this guy is being really, really fucking rude and obnoxious and disrespectful to all these cops. And they just stand there and take it for a long time until he knocks the detective's hat off, and then they hit him and start beating him. I was thinking if this guy had been black, they would have started beating the shit out of him earlier. And also, maybe would have killed him.
I couldn't quite tell if I'm rooting for Vincent or not, because in the beginning, he's a total douche. He's doing at the class reunion. He's like, "Do you know who I am?" Victor, like, "You're just a bartender." So when he gets his first comeuppance, you like it. But then again, like, he gets the shit beaten out of him because he's framed for... What is he framed for exactly? Is he framed for the murder? Not the murder.
Yes, for the murder of Pratt.
Right. The first murder.
Also, speaking of race, the detective played by Arlie Ermey, I don't know how you say his name, but like the one famous actor in this movie, he is racist. When he's interviewing the valet, he says, "Do you play basketball?" And then later, when they're at the crime scene and they find the gun, he turns to a black police officer and says, "That's a gun." Like he's explaining to her what a gun is when she's a uniformed cop who clearly knows what a gun looks like. So that's clearly part of his character. But I mean, the movie doesn't really go into it or explore that. That's not what it's going for. But the camcorder Rodney King quote unquote joke is in really, really fucking poor taste.
Other test of time things that just don't age well. The model, do you remember how she said she lost all of her weight?
Yes, Nutrisystem.
Yeah, exactly. So for people who don't remember, I don't think you could buy the food in the supermarket. I think it was just you bought from these little things in the strip malls. There'd be a Jenny Craig or there'd be a Nutrisystem. And these things still exist, but I think they're a little bit toned down. In the 90s, perfume and cologne ads were absolutely bonkers in how,
Right.
like, take your stereotype of the most ridiculous, pretentious student film in black and white, and that was every Calvin Klein perfume commercial. And people would rightfully make jokes about it. And there was a great one here where a dog slowly catches a frisbee. I'm sorry, not a dog. A man slowly catches a frisbee in his teeth, and
Right.
it's like Impression by Calvin Klein or something like that.
They're also dust busting her leg for no fucking reason.
However, one joke that made me laugh out loud that completely would go over the heads of your daughter and son, there is a montage, and it's a montage of just a simple conversation that he's explaining everything that happened over the night to Gloria. And to explain how long the montage goes, they could have the clock hand go far, or they could have, any number of things. The sunlight goes down and then comes up again, but they had a chia pet visibly grow. I thought that was very funny because obviously that's going to take days to go. I think I've never had a chia pet.
Well, it's a plant, it's grass, so yeah, it's
Right.
going to take days, not minutes. It's funny, you said that the perfume commercials were bonkers, and that was one thing I remembered about this movie is when Hexina is in a fit of rage, she screams, "I'm fucking bonkers!" I don't know why, but I thought that was so goddamn funny as a 13-year-old. And then when I was watching the movie this morning and she said that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And it made me laugh again, probably more out of nostalgia than it being actually funny. And then you just said the word bonkers, which is a word I don't hear very often. But let's talk about the sex scene. I feel like maybe this was, at the time, one of, or possibly the first sex scene I had ever seen in a movie. That's why it was memorable. Like, I remember being like, holy shit, this is sex? Is this what sex is? And, obviously it is meant to be a humorous sexual encounter. The close-ups of her face while she is in the throes of orgasmic pleasure are clearly ludicrous, or to use your word and hers, bonkers, where she's kind of just like meowing and making these like really over-the-top animal sounds. But this movie and this scene, quite frankly, did play an important role in my pubescent development. Let's put it like that. And it's funny watching it so many years later and just being like, why? It's so goddamn stupid.
The sex scene, it's ridiculous. It's not even that funny. I wasn't quite sure what was going on because I didn't know who Pratt was. And at this point in the film, I really don't know what hexed means. I still haven't put it together that Hexina is hexed and that's what it is. I think it's still kind of a witchcraft film and he's going to be cursed or something. He's going to be involved in a murder. I had no idea what's going on. I think maybe she's a secret agent and Pratt is a whole thing because she has to meet this secret guy. She says she was gonna fuck him, and then she tries to kill the main star, and then he gets away, and then they explain it, and then they go to the real Pratt, and when she gets a second chance to meet Pratt, she murders him immediately. So
Right.
I'm like, why is she fucking this stranger, and why not murdering him immediately? Like, it makes no sense to me.
I think the reason is that Matt, who she thinks is Pratt, isn't bad looking, and she figures, well, before I do the murder, why not have some fun? And so she has sex. She says that she comes 15 times, so she enjoyed it, and then was like, okay, now I'll do the murder. And then when she goes to meet the real Pratt, she's like, I already had sex. I came 15 times already. I'm just going to skip to the murdering part.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know that guy is more or less attractive than Matt. I mean, she just shoots him instantly. I think at that point, she's just like fed up.
And also, what a moron. If the whole point is to stop him from spreading these pictures, why murder him and then wonder where he's hiding it? Luckily, it's literally in his pocket, but it could have been anywhere. The smart thing to do would be to hold him at gunpoint and make him give you the film canister. And then if she wants to murder him, that's what she does.
That's fair. Also, from his point of view, it is stupid to invite her over to your house alone in the middle of the night meet in a public place, right? I mean, I don't know a lot about doing crime, but from every movie I've ever seen, if you're worried that the person who you're doing this secret deal with is going to be pissed at you and might want to hurt you, then you meet in public. So it's easier to exchange money for film
Right.
than it is to murder someone in public.
Or you think he would be armed too, as since he's blackmailing someone for $400,000.
Yeah, yeah. And probably you're just not really supposed to think about all of that. I mean, the plot mechanics do work well enough, I guess, in terms of following the suspects and stuff. I mean, you have to suspend belief if you're gonna just go along for the ride. Speaking of suspending disbelief, there's a scene where they're running through the hotel and they go through a wedding that's being held in a ballroom, and one cop is kind of blinded by something and he ends up punching the bride in the face and she goes down. And I guess in the vein of slapstick, a cop punching a woman in the face is supposed to be funny. I don't think it is, but whatever. And then a second later, another cop just shoots the groom. Point blank, he dies. The mother screams, "Oh my God, they killed my baby." Then it's just back to the chase with Matt and the cop. And I think you can maybe get away with something like that in a black comedy, but in this movie where it's a black comedy and also a slapstick, it just feels like, wait, what? What the fuck? Because all the other people who die in the movie, I'm not going to say they deserve it, but you're not like heartbroken. They're bad people who do shitty things in the movie. These are completely innocent people. And yeah, they just fucking murdered a groom on his goddamn wedding day. And it's like, get it? That's funny. LOL. Like, what?
That scene, I had gotten up to probably go to my fridge to like refill my drink or something. I'm still listening to the scene. I turned away for seconds and I go, did they just kill that guy? I had to rewatch that scene because it was so out of place.
And also, earlier in that scene, before the groom is murdered, the cops bust in and they're like, everybody freeze. And the cop shoots the gun in the air, which seems like a very, very stupid fucking thing to do in a hotel with many floors, but whatever. But the joke is that every time he fires his gun, the caterer is opening a champagne bottle, so there's a pop and no one reacts to the gunshot. That's a funny slapstick gag, but then to follow it up with the murder of the innocent man, yeah, just the two tones don't work together at all.
Right.
Also, speaking of things that are really disturbing in real life, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the sex scene, but Matt rapes her. By pretending to be Pratt, he has sex with her under false pretenses. This is rape.
Yeah, I mean, even for this murderer, she was trying to have sex with Pratt, who is a blackmailer guy. He was not trying to have sex with Matt.
Right. And I think what the movie is going for is it's fine because she's a murderer, and so who cares? But yeah, that logic doesn't really track. You can not like her for being a murderer, but you should still feel bad for her for being raped. And Matt is the hero of this movie, and if he's a guy who just can't help himself from lying, okay, that's a character flaw and you can still root for the guy. But yeah, when he becomes a rapist, little bit harder to root for the guy. Really, the only person in the movie who's genuinely good and root forable, not a word, is Gloria, the redhead friend. She's got an unrequited love for Matt. She's really sweet. And sorry to bring the conversation down, but I was looking at her IMDb page. She was murdered in real life. She was working as an actress. She was being robbed, and she caught the robber halfway through the act, and he killed her. He made it look like a suicide. It's this horrible, horrible fucking story for this young woman who had her whole life in front of her. And sorry, we should be just making fun of this shitty movie, but that was really fucking sad. I don't like it when that happens. If I'm doing research and I get really depressed with some really awful, depressing thing, I have to mention it to you, James, because I don't want to be depressed alone.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, okay, share the misery.
I guess.
There's one other person that's nice. Isn't the owner of the hotel nice?
Yeah, I guess. And there's a gag when Simon wants him to fire Matt, and he doesn't, and he says, "Why are the Jewish people always so forgiving?" One other just random logical leap when they have the confrontation at the end of the movie and Matt is hanging from the Holiday Palace sign, the giant sign on the roof. He's hanging off of it, and then like a bolt comes loose or something, and then the whole sign rotates 90 degrees. That just doesn't make any fucking sense, just based on physics or engineering or anything. And I know you're not supposed to question it, but I was like, what the fuck is that?
No, and it doesn't even go anywhere either. Like you'd think if it's gonna go out over the hotel, there's gonna be this huge like fight on the overhang. No, they both just fall off. It really goes nowhere.
No, it does, because then Hexina falls through a bus and she dies, and he falls not on the inflatable mat thing, but next to it on the fire truck. So there's
And
cushions
doesn't
and stuff on
die.
there.
Uh-huh.
No, but he breaks every bone in his body. Honestly, that bothered me less than the side turning 90 degrees. I don't really know why. Both are stupid and illogical and make no fucking sense whatsoever.
No, I haven't thought if he even landed in the air mattress, he would probably break every bone in his body from 50 stories up. I mean, it's like a 6-foot airbag. I mean, you're gonna die. I mean, and he fell smack onto the back of a truck. That part bothered me.
Fair. But James, let me ask you about the movie as a whole. Do you think that Hexed stands the test of time?
The first thing I'm going to say is that I genuinely laughed out loud a few times in this film. I thought there were some genuinely good laughs, but it can't figure out whether it's Heather's or if it's Naked Gun. And for that reason, I do think that this film does not stand up. It's got some good parts. It's not a completely irredeemable film. I'm not mad at you for having me watch this film. I'm very happy it was 92 minutes. However, I did watch it on that Tubi or something.
Yeah.
And because of the ads, I mean, this was like an hour and 45-minute film. So,
That's true.
That was annoying. But I'm not going to say that this film stands the test of time. If you've never seen it, you don't need to see it. This is a very bad film. But I had a little bit of fun watching it. What do you think, Al? Does Hex stand the test of time?
No, definitely not. There's way better black comedies. There's way better slapstick comedies. There's way better sex comedies. There's way better all of the things. This movie is not good. I agree with you. I laughed several times. There are some clever moments in the movie, but a lot of it is dumb. To your point about the movie not knowing what it is, according to IMDb, the director, Alan Spencer, did kind of disavow this movie, where he wanted it to be one thing and the studio got involved and forced him to make all these changes, and it was going to be kind of more noir and have more adult themes, and then the studio wanted it to be more for younger audiences, and that's why there's pop music in it. Divine Thing by INXS is in the opening credits, and then the movie ends with Walk on Water by Eddie Money. I think those are really the only two well-known pop songs in it, but the studio made him do shit that he didn't like, so maybe that's part of what we're seeing and what we're reacting to. But in the end, it is not a great movie. It's a movie that you'd never heard of. I'm guessing many of our listeners had never heard of this. I'm curious, if you're out there and you had heard of this movie or you'd seen it, please let us know at Test of Time Pod. I'm dying to know. Also, just from a Test of Time perspective, the way that Matt gets the confession from Hexina is that his friend Gloria lends him her Sony tape recorder, but tells him to be careful because she's still making payments on it.
I hate that trope that the murderer just confesses everything like a cartoon villain, and then they go, "Ha, I had a little button recorder on my shirt or whatever, and you just confessed everything to the police." Like, it's annoying when that happens.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't stand the test of time because then in 1993, you wouldn't assume that the person you're talking to would be recording your conversation.
Yes.
Now you always assume that everyone is recording
Correct.
every move that you make and everything that you say. So even a megalomaniacal villain isn't just going to confess something because of course it's going to be recorded.
And Sony products are not the high quality they were in 1993.
Right. But this movie doesn't stand the test of time. It's pretty bad. Is it worth seeing? Probably not. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to talk about Species. It's another sexy movie. This one's a sci-fi movie. I'm guessing the sex is sexier than that one, although maybe not because she kills people, I think. I haven't seen that movie in a very, very, very long time. Did you ever see Species?
Yes, I have.
Well, that'll be a good one. Until then, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Let us know your thoughts about Hexed. I mean, no, you probably don't have any thoughts about Hexed. Write to us anyway. You can say anything about any subject. Who cares? We do love hearing from you. You can write us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. We always appreciate that. And we'll see you next time, everyone.
Happy New Year. Bye, everyone.